Hi everyone, welcome to an hour with LawSikho. This is Ramanuj Mukherjee welcoming you on behalf of IVE Leaders and LawSikho.com. It's great to have all of you today listening to this an hour with LawSikho. And today we have a very special guest, Priyanka Saraswat, who's an advocate, and we're going to talk about the experience of starting out as a young advocate in Mumbai and what kind of how to build your practice. What's Priyanka? Welcome
Hi
to an.
Ramanuj. Hi.
So, Priyanka, before we go into anything else, we want to hear from you. How did you get started as an advocate, as somebody who's practicing law, as a litigator? Why not choose corporate law? Like, how did you end up being a litigator?
I guess it was my experience with moot courts in college and also experience with certain corporate internships in college time that I decided that I was more interested in arguing the matters in court and not so much in drafting or basically the corporate desk work. It gave me more, I'd say, joy to be arguing matters before a judge. So I decided to pursue litigation after I was done with my degree.
Okay. So, tell us a little about your college and it seems that you have been orienting yourself towards practicing law even when you're in college. So tell us a little about it.
Yeah. So I graduated from Government Law College, Mumbai, and the college atmosphere in GLC at least is a lot moot oriented and competition oriented. Um, we are everywhere. We participate in moots on international level, on national level. Anybody who wants to be a person who wants to develop their argumentative skills and litigation skills gets into mooting early on. Like I got into mooting from my first year itself. I did sort of taper it down by the end of my end of my degree, but the few years that I was mooting, the research work I did for it, the way I presented my cases was what made me build up my confidence in talking to somebody who has more knowledge than me. If you're in front of a person who is judging you on basis of the knowledge they have, which is 5 times more than yours, you need a certain amount of confidence, and that is what I think mooting has taught me.
Okay. So what are like how did you get started in the court? What sort of practice do you do? If you can tell us a little about your practice.
So I actually joined a law firm, which was basically a boutique law firm, while majority of our client base was from the real estate sector, but it was it was there were various types of cases. We had basic commercial litigation from, you know, from contract disputes to rent disputes, anything like that. So I joined the law firm. My law firm that I joined was a very small level law firm. So I actively chose a law firm of that size was because I thought that it would be easier for me to gain a varied experience from arguing to in court to drafting to even getting the filing procedures, which I don't think law firms actually let you do even in the beginning years. Is that I got to go with the clerks to the filing office and work on the objections that were taken out in the planes and everything. So I believe that a smaller firm helps you out in gaining a very varied experience in being a litigator instead of just being somebody who argues.
Okay. And so after this, like how did you got around to like what like I mean what did you
My work was basically general litigation. While it was supposed to be civil commercial litigation, I, by a stroke of luck, did get into the criminal aspect of certain commercial transactions also, which doesn't really happen, but I had a lucky day, I guess. So I have been to court for criminal case matters also, for civil matters also, commercial litigation. Um, so I have been to consumer court. So it is a very vast area of basically any commercial transaction that leads to a litigation. I have been most of them.
Okay. So, what are the most challenging things about when you begin to practice as a young advocate in Mumbai? What are the most challenging things? What would you say are the three biggest challenges? Let's say.
So there are two kinds of being of in starting advocates in, at least in Bombay. It would be the ones who join law firms and the ones who get into independent litigation practice. I was lucky enough to get into a law firm that gave me a stable base, that for which I did not have to look for my own clients. But when you work as a independent advocate in a city like Bombay, the biggest challenge is finding clients. I have had friends who had the guts to start it out as an independent advocate in a city like Bombay, and the it's like you have to technically market yourself. You have to find people who will trust you enough to give you their cases. What
Right.
there was some okay. Yeah, so the biggest challenge as a person in a firm would be that you have to have the mindset to go and do anything that is required of you, from running between courts to just going and listening on a matter that is not yours but might be related to your uh, case, and you will have to just go and sit in the court for hours at end and listen to what's being said, take down notes, and you cannot lag in that because your notes are the ones that are going to help your seniors furthermore in your matters. So you should have a mindset that nothing is small. Be it going to the filing department and just trying to sort out the objections that are there in the plaint, working on the deadline that this thing has to be filed and lodged at a certain date. In the very first few years, you have to do everything, and you can't think that in the very beginning itself you're going to go and stand in front of a judge. You're not. You are, maybe your seniors are going to trust you enough to let you get an adjournment on the basis that the advocates are not ready, or maybe even have a matter kept back. Like that's what in the Mumbai language, legal language, we say a matter being kept for a later stage because your counsel is not free at the moment. So I believe that the biggest first thing that a person should keep in mind is be open to whatever is being given to you. Secondly, don't get depressed if you're not getting clients or not getting work. There are clients out there, you're going to get them. You just have to keep on persisting on what you're doing. And in the beginning, I would suggest, even if you want to become an independent advocate, join a counsel who has some experience on it. Maybe work as a junior counsel under somebody who has worked in that field for a longer time. That is what the general practice in Bombay is. Even independent advocates join somebody as a sort of an apprentice, because on your own you will not be able to gain the exposure that somebody who has been through that and done it can help you out with.
Okay. So you not finding clients. So when people don't find clients, what do they do? Like, how do you get clients?
As I said, it's marketing. You approach your you approach your seniors, you approach somebody whom you've come to know through a matter or anything, and ask them to probably, if they come across a smaller matter that they cannot take for any certain reason, they send it your way. You have to network, you have to find people who will help you out with cases. You have to find people who have enough faith in you to recommend you to clients who come to them, because certain type of senior counsels have so much workload, they don't take every case that comes to them, and that case will go on to somebody. So if you have a network which is strong enough, in which that people actually remember to recommend you, that is what helps further on.
So how do you, as a young lawyer, how do you learn the work? Like, where do you begin? Because you graduate, okay, you work with somebody in a senior's chamber, but like, let's say you have some work of your own. How do you do it? Because every case is different. There are different laws involved. Sometimes different tribunals, different courts are involved. So how do you go about figuring out what to do?
The first and biggest thing is research. You need to know the court where you're going to be. You need, if you are the one who is doing it from the scratch, you're the one who is drafting the plaint itself, then you need to know each and every nitty-gritty of the code, because sometimes the plaint just gets thrown out, or it gets a pile of objections just because you have referred to the code wrong, or just because there is something that the uh, department thinks that is not being written correctly. And if the department doesn't think that the plaint is correct, then it's not going forward. It can languish in the department for ages. So know what objections can be raised, know how to take care of them. Even little things like in Bombay High Court, a a document in Marathi has to have an English translation of it, and that has to be an official government translation. Little knowing things, and again, as I said, it's only the people who have already gone through it can teach you. Maybe if you want to know the way of arguing, if you're very new, and mooting does teach you how to argue, but doesn't teach you how to argue in a real court, because the way the conversations are held in a courtroom are completely different. Maybe just go and sit in the courtroom in your free time and listen to advocates. If you want to, you can probably check the daily list of the courtrooms and see which are the interesting cases that you can find. By names you can recognize, okay, this matter might be a bigger one, or go to the bar association library and all of those places. One thing that I've learned in my 2 years in Bombay is that everybody is approachable. You just have to have confidence in what you're talking to the person. They are approachable, but they are not going to waste their time in chit chatting with you. So if you have a important thing to ask, you can approach somebody and ask them. They will help you out, but they are not going to sit in the bar association library with you and gossip. So take help, don't shy, network, find the correct people to help you out with what is required, and don't feel sad if in the beginning in the matters something doesn't go your way, because some it takes experience to know how to talk to a judge in a courtroom. That is where all of these people have gotten their fame from knowing what to say, when to say, whom to say. That is where the whole legal fraternity is based on. So you will learn it slowly. In the beginning, just do your work, give a 200%. And yes, research is the biggest thing you have to do.
Got it. So, okay. So basically, what I understand is that you need to ask your seniors. You can ask, in a bar council library, bar association library, there are seniors. You can go and ask them if you can't understand something. You should attend the courts and listen to the matters that are happening.
Yeah.
Good lawyers arguing. There's a lot to learn from that as well. And at the same time, you're saying that there's a like there would be mistakes, but you learn from your
Yes.
own mistakes.
Yes.
So one question, like we all go to, like, these days law school is expensive and you spend 4 or 5 years in law school. So I mean, what are the things that you think law school should be teaching which will help people to get better at practice? Like one thing I can think of is that the registry, how the
Yeah,
registry
that's true.
should be taught very easy.
Like some colleges give mooting uh, classes, but
Yeah,
nobody teaches you how departments are handled.
is what colleges teaches you is statutes and
Yeah,
case law.
that's true.
They don't
That's
teach
true.
you, if you learn something, mooting, you don't learn to argue in the court by mooting. It's
No, no,
nice
they mooting just gives you confidence in how to speak.
how
It,
to
it,
speak.
it's
Then you
it's
start speaking.
it's a public speaking exercise. You do not you don't have the whole strict sense
I mean,
of
it's not comparable. Let's just say that. So,
what.
I'm just saying that arguing in a real court and mooting is not comparable. Let's just
No,
say
it's
that.
not. It's completely different.
Right.
One thing that the colleges should encourage is actually court visits. What so back in my college days, we used to have lectures from 6:45 to 10:30 in the morning, and we had the rest of the day completely free. And if any one of us didn't want to go back home, we used to randomly just go to the high court, which luckily for us was literally 5 minutes walking distance, and just sit in random courtrooms and listen to judges and advocates talk. If we did not, so that at least gives you a sense of how courts work. uh, in the final year, for a very small duration, we do have like a nominal thing called court visit in our college, in which they take you to the courts, but one single court visit is not going to do anything. And especially in colleges that are way far from the cities and everything, they could probably do things like we used to have in school, the study tours and things like that.
Yeah.
They should encourage seeing real life courtrooms to so that the students can actually understand the difference between mooting and arguing. Because by if you have not been in a courtroom scenario, you tend to believe that mooting is how courts are run. It's not. Also, one thing is that, yes, as you said, departments, how to handle filing, how to handle smaller things, how to handle removal of objections, where to go for what kind of a issue you have. Because even though in law firms you have clerks that handle these kind of things, if you are going independent and you cannot afford to have a clerk of your own in the beginning, you will be the one who's going to be doing this running around.
Right.
So yeah, at least the hierarchy of departments, what kind of stuff goes where for filing, because there is a sea of departments in every court, on original side, on appellate side, lower courts. One wrong place, you go to one wrong place and you will probably lose half an hour, because nobody is going to directly tell you that you're in the wrong place. The whole hierarchy of this has to be taught to you in your 5 years of college.
Okay. So, tell us about your first experience in the court. Like, how was it? Like, how was your first day or first month when you began practicing? What were the interesting experiences from that?
In the very first month or months, I would say I did not face a judge. When I went along with my seniors, I would stand behind them while they were arguing, hand them papers, make sure they have the correct judgment in their hand before they are going to cite it. And all of this is what, at least in a law firm, you learn to do, because uh, this is also sort of part of the pressure that's in a courtroom scenario. Like, the person who's arguing is so much into it that he's not going to look at the title of the judgment that's in front of him before he starts citing it, and then he sees that it's the wrong one and everything's going to blow apart. So in the first few months, I learned just how to handle the pressure of being in a courtroom, especially in sensitive matters where arguments were at such a stage that just one slip and the person's concentration goes away. When it reached the point where I did appear in front of the judge, I would say, I did not. In the very beginning, I got more of a chance to be in front of the sessions court, and the judge had some. By then, he knew me by. They knew my face by and everything. So it was a bit more comfortable for me to speak to them. Then instead, if they had just made me stand in front of a judge on my day one, I would have stammered throughout. So it helps you build a confidence after probably seeing the judge a day and again for like 3 months, 4 months continuously before you have to speak in front of them. You consider them human. You don't think that they are some really big mighty
Yeah.
person before whom you
Familiarity
can't
counts.
speak.
Right,
What?
right. So the familiarity really matters. I understand.
Yes, the
So
familiarity helps.
what other kind of experience was it? Like how does it work in a litigation chamber, litigation law firm? What is your role there? And apart from obviously visiting the court, I'm sure there's other duties. So
There
how
is
did it work?
a lot of people think that litigation is just your 11 to 5 hours, but it's not. So it is coming into office an hour early, making sure you have your paperwork and everything settled before you head to the court. And the actual work really begins after 5 o'clock, when you have to prepare for all the cases coming up the next day, the day after next, the whole week. Preparation just never ends. So you, after your court hours are done, you give in further 4 or 5 hours to doing the further work. And yeah, compared to corporate, we didn't used to like get out of office at 2 in the night or something, but it was a constant 12-hour day. And since a lot of litigation firms also take care of arbitrations, one if it's not a court day, it's an arbitration day. So the work never stops, and it has to be a well-oiled machine. If it's a single matter, everybody has their own role to play, and if you stutter in your role, the whole thing is going to come to a standstill, and that's going to make the whole matter suffer. So you need to know your work thoroughly. And one thing that I learned in a law firm is ask questions. Ask 1,000 dumb questions, but ask them. Because if you don't ask a question of what paper goes where and it goes wrong, you are going to suffer a far greater embarrassment than you're going to suffer by asking a dumb question. So that is one thing that I learned very early on in my litigation experience.
Okay. So what were the best moments of your litigation career so far?
Uh, I am very new with this, so I guess the best uh, moments would be the first time I stood in front of a judge and I was shaking a bit, and the judge was like, "Calm down. I'm not doing anything. I'm just asking you about a certain thing." Then the first time a matter reached from the moment of filing to the final arguments, and we won the matter. The first time the judge gave the order which was in our favor, the feeling is just something out of the world. I guess this is the kind of feeling for which I did end up choosing litigation in the first
Yes.
instance. And again, it all, I guess, I don't know if a lot of people will go through this, but the first time I am looking at a very complicated matter and I'm reading it again and again and again, the first time it actually strikes you what law goes where, like it's a jigsaw puzzle that's finally come to place. It is a good, it's a really good feeling in the very beginning of your career.
Okay. Okay, understood. So, like, what are the challenges now that you have been like 2 years into practice? What are the challenges you face now, and how have they changed over time?
The challenges in the very beginning, the challenges were that I would doubt myself a lot, that even if I know what is the correct answer, I would probably, in front of my seniors also, I would probably think 100 times before speaking a correct answer. Now that's not so. I can quite confidently even speak out a wrong answer, because I know that most of the meetings that go on behind the scene in a matter are just discussions are just bouncing off the ideas. But the problems that come now are that by now I'm supposed to be well versed in a lot of things, and when there is so many kind of flaws, you tend to forget some. You Everybody is human. So one thing that I have to constantly be aware of is that I have to keep on revising. I have to go back to the codes and remind myself that this is where what I need to relearn, and then also keeping myself abreast with all the things that are happening new, all the changes, all the amendments that are coming in, because sometimes you get so tied up with whatever you're doing that you cannot keep up with the news, and amendment just flies you by, at least till the next day your boss asks you have you read it, and you are completely blank on it. So the challenge is to not just work but also keep myself completely thoroughly fresh with the law that I'm supposed to be practicing.
Okay. So how do you decide in which area to specialize? Like, is it even a question early on in your career? Should you be specializing, or should you be specializing after some time? How does it work?
At least in my opinion, you should wait a few years in after you have got you've graduated, because uh, there are multiple areas you can specialize in, unless you have probably had an experience of say a really long term internship during your uh, degree years, that you know that okay, this is what really sails my boat, this is what makes you really happy. Until unless you have that confidence in the subject you want to specialize in, wait a few years, uh, do general litigation, understand how the court works, because in litigation matters, in the end, law will change, but the whole crux of how the court works will remain the same. So
Right.
gather your experience in that, and then decide whether you even want to specialize or not, or you can just stay in a commercial, in a basic commercial litigation, your alternate dispute resolutions and all of those fields. You don't need to specialize. I believe that a lot of what somebody learns in a year or two of generalized LLM is what you will learn in a year or two of generalized litigation practice also. So
Okay.
wait a few years, gather some experience, and then decide whether you even want to specialize or not.
Right. So even specializing is not all that necessary. Plus,
Yeah,
your perspective, it is that, I mean, you, at least if you are going to specialize, then wait for it. So on the
yeah,
other hand, like, there's a contrary opinion also that, that you should, if you specialize early, then you struggle less, and you quickly start building your practice, because in the end of the day, it is easier to get work as a specialized lawyer than as a general lawyer. Okay.
and that would be in very select fields. Like if you're probably getting into say admiralty law or cyber law, and you want to very specifically focus on that, then obviously just right after you're done with your degree, go ahead and get your LLM also, because if you just want to focus on those.
Specialization is not about LLM, right? So, for example, so let's say somebody decides that I'm going to work on a specific tribunal, and I know other,
Yeah,
lawyers who have built
yeah,
their practice, especially when you start working independently and you're not working for an established lawyer. It becomes necessary that whatever gets you clients faster, you need to do
yeah,
that. And what happens is, like, let's say you specialize in a certain tribunal. So on one hand, you have big courts like Bombay High Court, Delhi High Court, Supreme Court, where you are nobody, right? But if you, let's say, practice in before a smaller tribunal, okay,
yeah, I get
it
that.
could be something as small
Sorry.
as, let's say, a PF tribunal, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
or like that, and you start arguing that one is that it is easier to find your feet there, because the talent pool is not so deep, so you can easily as a newcomer make a name, and then you get enough matters, and also, uh, basically you can build establish a practice faster in working for universities, working
yeah,
on the
yeah.
UGC related matters, right? And she worked for one university. That university owner referred her to one more, and then one more and one more. And everybody knew that, okay, if you have university problems with UGC,
Yeah.
you go to this person. So when you specialize like that, your
See,
name's faster.
that's true. Like in the past 1 year, I saw a rise in the people who started working in RERA tribunal a lot, because that was just coming up, and that was a place that people could build a niche of themselves. It's a good way. It's a good way of building yourself in a field.
way of building a legal practice. I was asking your opinion.
It's one of the ways, but I mean that is one of the specialization ways. If you don't want to go the whole LLM way, but I believe that in the beginning, understanding different courts and different tribunals is more important than being in a single tribunal. Say for example, you have something in a very small level tribunal, and the matter starts to go for an appeal. You have lost and the matter is going for an appeal, and the client prefers that you are the one who handles the appeal, but you don't have any experience in going to a higher court than that tribunal. That's
Right.
where you will use a client. That's where you will lose a client. You will have to refer the client to some other advocate who is far more practiced in that
That
court or that
is
tribunal.
also one point. I understand what you're saying, but I
Yeah.
have heard on the contrary also what happens. See, every
Yeah.
logic has two sides, right?
Yeah,
So what
that's
happens
true.
in some cases is that they start because the client is so happy with them because it has gone
Yeah.
into app. So what happens is that the client asks him to brief a senior lawyer. So
Yeah.
I at the court, and he kept doing it, and over a period of time, now he argue at the tribunal anymore at all because high court cases pay more. And
That's true.
also because he knows so many people at the tribunal, so other lawyers who are still at the tribunal, they refer all of them refer cases to him because they know him and they trust him and they are friends with him. So there are different ways, like of course, like all the roads lead to doing it. But I totally take your point on this, that when you are starting off your practice, one like sort of things, and I have heard this from many others also, that the more you do, number one advantage is that you figure out what you really like. It is not necessary that you like everything. Maybe you are going to love consumer cases, who litigation for 5 years. He has worked in big law firms in their litigation department, right? He has worked for Shardula Machan Mangaldas. And then now what he does basically is he handles consumer cases all over India for different companies. So a lot of companies, he has built a network of lawyers. He will refer and manage like consumer cases for companies, right? And that's all he does. So sometimes people, they find junior years is the only time when you get to do that, because
Yes.
as you become older and you have more responsibilities and you have more name also in one area, you are not going to experiment so much. So young, the first few years.
You will actually be expected to know. Very beginning, nobody expects you to know anything. They will just assume that you're going a certain way because you have been told to go a certain way, or not always, but nobody wants you to be a know-it-all in the very first year. But if you probably say in your 10th year and that's when you decide, okay, this is not where I want to be and I want to move, it will probably take you longer to get people aboard the idea. So when you're a junior, you can roam around in every field and try to decide what you want to do.
Right. So when you when now that you are been practicing for a couple of years, so there is this whole thing about building your face value in courts. So how does that part work? Like, do you start arguing more in certain courts, and and how important is that face value? Of course, you get to know certain judges, how they react, what do they like, and I think that's pretty precious in the practice of law. So how does that work? How do you gather that kind of expertise?
Face value is actually very important in courts because for example, if you take the concept of mentioning that happens in courts, uh, it's not a very systematic thing. In as soon as the judge comes to sit, everybody who has to mention a matter gets up and approaches the bench, approaches the bar, and then it's up to the judge. The judge will look at you and will ask the person to come up. And I have seen a lot of senior counsels do mentioning, which is a very general thing, which is a very small thing, but just the face of a senior counsel gets them the opportunity to speak first sometimes. Some courts have actually stated that they do not want a senior counsels doing mentioning because you can't exactly say it's beneath them because it's also a part of your legal work. But face value in court does give you a chance to speak more compared to a new person, because a judge who sees you, who has seen you for a very long time, who has heard you argue for a very long time, will have some faith in what you have to say when you come up before them. So if it is a matter that's getting adjourned and you want to speak up, if you are somebody the judge has seen often, they'll probably afford you a, a minute or two extra to speak up. But I have also seen a lot of very new advocates get chance to speak up. It's more about how you present yourself in front of a judge. If you have been confident and good with your arguments since the very beginning of the matter, the judge is going to respect you equally as your co-counsel or as your opponent's counsel would. But face value, as it builds up, it both in front of the judges and in front of clients, your you can say your market value builds up, because clients trust you more if they see you in court, because a lot of them are frequent litigators, and if they have seen you in court arguing, then maybe they will approach you if they like your style. So face value in a court is very important, because apart from your oration, being seen is where you get your work from.
Right. Okay, so that's I think very really useful for people who are trying to build their practice, or people who would want to build their practice. So what do you think are the peculiar things about Mumbai, in courts in Mumbai, that you don't face anywhere else? One thing I would definitely want to ask is that, is it possible to practice in lower courts in Mumbai without knowing Marathi, or is knowing Marathi mandatory?
No, not it's not going to be possible for you to have a very successful career in, especially in lower courts, without knowing Marathi. Tribunals, sometimes the judge is going to afford you a chance to speak in English if you do not understand the language. But if you know Marathi, both from the departments to the judge, it is a lot more easy to communicate. And as I was told in the very beginning of my career, was that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So you need to learn the language of the court that you are in. So it is very important. And coming to the other question, what are the more peculiar things
What
about
about the
Bombay?
High Court? Before you go to that, what about High Court? In the High Court, is it possible to practice without knowing Marathi?
Yes, comparatively, yes, because High Court, the judges tend to prefer English over Marathi. Until and so it's a bit of a switch in lower courts. I've seen that the judges would tend to speak to you in Marathi if you know it, and then switch to English if required. However, in high courts, the judges will talk to you in English and switch to Marathi if it is required.
So it is understandable that many judges in the High Court are not even Marathi. So they have come from other benches in other courts.
Yeah.
So yeah, and compared to that, in the lower judiciary, everybody is taken from everybody is local.
That's
Everybody-
true. So
in
Marathi is important, because in High Court, arguing in Marathi is not required, but knowing Marathi to deal with the departments is required.
so in the registry, you have to deal in Marathi basically, even in the High Court.
It's a bit of a sometimes it's a language barrier, sometimes it's something that gets you a connection with a person in the department easier if you know the language. But it happens in every state. Official will sort of deal with you more easily if you know the language that they're speaking, than if you are speaking in a different language altogether. So it's the departments that's where even in the High Court you're going to need to know Marathi. And Marathi, at least in Bombay, Marathi, and at least Maharashtra wise, Marathi is not a difficult language if you know Hindi, because the script is same. A lot of base words, where everything comes from is quite similar. So
So it's possible
spending
to learn. It's easy to learn.
it's easy to learn. Even though I would say I learned more of Marathi in the first 6 months of my litigation career than I did in in the 5 years of college, because I
You are
came
not
in.
a Marathi speaker, right? So
Yeah,
you're not from Maharashtra.
no,
So you learned it while practicing,
yeah, and it's not a difficult language to learn.
right? Especially if you know Hindi, it's fairly easy. So
Yeah,
even if
it's fairly easy.
you don't know Marathi and you want to practice in Maharashtra, then you better learn Marathi. Is the point, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
So what are the other unique things you're going to talk about in about
Um,
practicing in?
one thing I would say that's a bit more unique in Bombay is the stress that's put upon being a solicitor. So
Okay.
in Bombay, especially the senior councils, almost everybody is a solicitor. Everybody is clear their sols, and it in a way, obviously, because it's an all comprehensive exam for which you have to study everything, and if you have cleared it uh, on a practical level, also your knowledge will be a lot more than a general person with an LLB. But it's actually considered a bit a more important thing for you to have cleared your solicitor's exam if you are in any way planning to become an independent advocate. So that is one unique thing about Bombay. Then another thing would be that uh, so that advocates, I don't know much about the experience in other courts, but the advocates in Bombay High Court are the most friendly people that I have met in the fraternity. I have approached senior counsels who have a magnanimous persona and asked them questions about a law and gotten correct answers, and answers that that will probably be longish and have taken them a significant amount of time in answering, but they have been patient with me and answered me. So that is one thing that I found really interesting, is that nobody really cares about what level you are in the fraternity. You can approach anybody. I have approached clerks to ask them questions about the court and their workings. They do not mind answering your questions. So the Bombay High Court is a very friendly place.
Okay.
That's been my experience.
Yeah, that's really important, I think, for young lawyers. So that's
Yeah.
quite good to hear that. So, tell me a little about the solicitor's exam. Are you planning to take this exam? Have you taken it?
I
What?
have not taken it. It's a bit of a longish procedure because you have to be a article clerk under a solicitor for 3 years before you are eligible to give that exam. It's a longish process. A lot of people do it. What they do is they start their articleship right after their third year of college, because BILS, the Bombay Incorporated Law Society, that grants the solicitor's license, allows you to do that from your fourth year onwards. So a lot of people start doing the articleship in the uh, fourth year, fifth year, then one more year of articles, and then they go ahead to give the exam. I have not planned to do it as of yet, but if I do want to get into independent practice, it would be in my own favor to do it. Also, it is the, the success rate, I would say, as in the passing rate of people who clear the exam, is as difficult as CA examinations. So
No, I've heard that only 3-4% people pass this exam.
yeah, so it's like say around 150 people appear every year, and around 2 or 3 licenses are granted every year. The success rate is at that level. No, almost nobody clears it on the first attempt. So it's a great commitment. You'll study everything for it. I know people who uh, took close to a year of doing nothing but studying to give that exam. So it is a longish procedure, and it does afford you a lot of knowledge, and furthermore a lot of opportunities, because there is a network that you build by being a
Right.
solicitor that you will not be a part or will not be able to be a part of if you are not in that field.
Right. Very interesting. So, So tell us about your future plans. Like, what are your plans going ahead?
So right now I'm on a sabbatical. I decided to take a break because I needed it, and I thought it will be easier for me to take it in the beginning than a few years later. I want to continue being in the litigation field because that's what excites me. That's what I find interesting. Uh, my majority practice in the past 2 years was real estate related. I might get into a different kind of a field now, or probably go into uh, generalized commercial litigation instead. But I will be going back into litigation practice itself.
Okay. So, what has been your worst experience while practicing law in Mumbai?
Um, that would probably be having to run between courts and office while it's pouring heavily and you are completely drenched and you have no means to dry yourself while you're shivering in the AC courtroom. It's mostly been that. It's just that with Bombay, a bigger problem comes during the monsoons because you cannot stop doing the work that you're doing.
I totally understand. I have been in Mumbai,
Yeah.
experience.
So
First
that
couple
that
of
that
times I had to go to the office. First day I thought, okay, I have an umbrella, so I'll be fine.
yeah.
And then
That doesn't work like
the
that.
time I reached office, it is as if I never had any umbrella.
Yeah.
I was drenched. Then I
We
was
we we used to have things like used to have towels in our drawers, extra pair of shoes,
exactly. So that's
sometimes
what.
probably extra pair of pants because you know you're going to be completely drenched. So you need to work around the rains. They are not going to go anywhere. So you will have to learn to maneuver around them. So as long as the day is probably just you going to the court once and coming back is fine. But when you have to run between for n number of times, it becomes a headache. So yeah, I think the worst times would probably be that. Even though I love rains the most, but not during office hours.
Right, sure. So, what other difficult experiences you had as a lawyer so far?
Uh, in the beginning, I guess it would be not knowing how I when to speak up because while it's a very friendly field, I would say there are certain places where you need to know how to speak, when to approach a person, and what way to approach a person. But you will make mistakes, you will learn from them, you will get better.
So, tell us
So
about one at least that I can learn from.
what
At least
I
tell
can
us one mistake. Tell us at least one mistake that we can learn from.
one mistake that you can learn from would be that before you approach before you, not just as a person, if you are going into a meeting with a senior counsel or with any person who is going to be advising you on that matter, know your paperwork, know your matter thoroughly, read it as many times as you can, know what document goes where because the juniors are the ones that are supposed to know what exhibit is where, and you will be the one person who they look to when a paper has to be given to them. Your judgments, your exhibits, your plaint, anything that is in the matter, you need to have it at the tip of your fingers. You cannot slack in reading. I know that every matter goes into thousands, 10,000s of pages.
Hmm.
As the bigger the matter, the more paperwork there's going to be. But you sort of subscribed to the whole thing when you got into the field. So read thoroughly, read as many times as you can.
Okay, but is that really possible when you have like multiple matters going on next day? You don't have time. How does people manage time? How do you actually?
Uh, you don't sleep much.
Okay.
Sleep gets sacrificed completely. But you have techniques. You know that if you're reading a judgment, then you are going to skim through, find the ratio. If the ratio is important, the ratio says something that's important to you, you read the obiter. You don't directly start reading from para 1. Plaint, there are going to be certain paras and clauses that are going to be standard, that are going to be there in every matter. So you don't need to thoroughly read those standard clauses, jump the standard clauses. But the clauses that talk about the most important things, like make a coloring book out of it, underline, highlight, do whatever. If possible, make your own copy. I know it's a lot of waste of paper, but at least of the plaint of the important pages, make your own copy and make notes in them, meeting notes, council notes, everything that is being said to you that you find important regarding those portions, write it down. And write it down. Don't think you're going to remember it, because you're not, because there are multiple matters going on at the same time. You're not going to remember what is important. So that reminds me, this is one thing that I learned from a senior counsel, is what he used to call his little black book. It was a book that he had, in which he had started writing down topics and important judgments for those since the very beginning of his career. So we were sitting in a meeting and we are talking about a topic, and he would just randomly, he just told somebody to get the notebook. He opened it, flipped a page, and then cited down 5 judgments that were right on topic. Because he knew, he from the very beginning had started collecting those judgments. He didn't just cite them in court. He knew that these are landmarks and they're going to stay landmarks throughout. So he noted them down for further reference. So that's
Maybe
one thing that I learned from the senior counsel.
a habit with many successful litigators.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
a very successful litigator in tax. So he had his. He doesn't write it on a notebook. He had his on his laptop. He has this, whole detailed notes on different cases, and he literally had everything on anything. Like he even had cases like, if what if the other counsel, misquotes a judgment, then what is the judgment on that?
Yeah.
And he's gonna pull it out and throw it. Like it makes it so prepared that that's how a formidable lawyer, I guess, is created.
I guess the person I learned it from was a bit old school, so he kept it in a notebook instead of on his computer. But yeah, anywhere have those case laws for future references. Using one case, you are not going to use a case only once. You're going to use it 10 times in your career.
Great. So, do you have a notebook like that or some?
Yes, I do. I'm also tiny bit old school like that, and also because you cannot take it in court. You cannot take your laptop to court, as in you can't have. Uh, Not every judge allows you to have electronics in court. So depends upon court to court, tribunal to tribunal. So it's easier for you to have it in an analog style. Also, if you know a point, you can probably tell the judge that, interject and tell him, and if the judge asks you, where's the judgment, you can easily say that I do not have it at hand right now and I can provide it to you next time. But you need to be confident enough that their point is going to be there in the written judgment. So for that, you need to have notes that you can refer to.
Right. Okay. Great. So, it's time, it's 9 p.m., and we need to wrap this up. So, before we finish this, any final message for people who are looking to practice to litigation in Mumbai?
I guess my only point is going to be, if you want to do it, trust yourself that you will be able to do it. Don't think that you don't have probably the memory power to remember everything, or you don't have the confidence enough to speak. You are going to fail in the beginning, and you are going to learn from your own mistakes. You're going to get better at it. Nobody becomes a formidable lawyer in the very first year, or in maybe even the first half decade of their lives. It's only the very few who end up finding really great cases in the very beginning and become really strong lawyers. You will get cases that you will be able to show your prowess in further down the line. But if you want to do it, do it. One thing, I'm sorry, it's going to take a bit longer, but one thing I could not touch upon was that if you are a, if, if you are a, oh, you can't see me. Just give me a second, please.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all right. We can hear you. Please
Yeah,
continue.
you can hear me. So sorry about that. So, in the if you are a first generation lawyer, especially in Mumbai, starting to get independent, it is going to be difficult financially. A lot of people who start as independent lawyers in Bombay have either a are locals from Bombay who have a home where they don't have to worry about rent, or they probably belong to legal families. So if you are somebody who doesn't belong to Bombay and doesn't have a background in law, it is going to be a lot more difficult for you. So it is a decision that you have to take after thinking a lot about a lot of things. But again, I just say, if you want to do it, do it.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights and so many stories. So we hope to have you another day, maybe talking about something more technical and some specific law or something like
Sure.
that. And it'll be great. So thank you so much for joining us and everybody who came online and listened to us today. Thank you very much. Do subscribe to lawsikho.com so that you don't miss other interesting videos we'll be having soon. And good night and goodbye.